All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Share to thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for Tafshin Pei, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this year as a zuchos for Besaros Tavos Am Yisrael. And our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Habalin Latova, the Kelman family for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Amit Ben David Levi, brother of Itai Levi, who was killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Hanukkah. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah's Neshama Shav and Aliyah, the family in Chama, we hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of our hostages will come home with Shalom and Bekarov, and our holy soldiers will be successful. B'chol ma'asei yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Mamish a lot to do today. Today's daf is daf Lamed 30, but we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on daf Chavtes Amud Beis 29b, and we left off 4 lines down from the top. Hahu da'achmin le'edim lachavre b'kilseit. We'll say, so remember again, interesting case over here. So remember again, let's just go like this. Reuven lent Shimon money, and now again, Reuven, of course, would like to collect. That's normally what happens. So what occurs? But Reuven wants to go ahead. Reuven does a little bit of a setup, and what he does is he hid witnesses behind the canopy of the bed. See, he's having a conversation with Shimon. Shimon has no idea about what's going on over here. Reuven hides witnesses by the canopy of the bed. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Amrlei, manali bi'adecha. So Reuven says, Shimon, do you owe me money? Amrlei hein. Shimon says, yep, owe you $1,000. Amar. Iri v'shachvi l'havalach sahadi. So he says, so Reuven says to Shimon, do you accept upon you that both the people who are awake and the people who are sleeping should be the witnesses? So Shimon now just got a hodah. He just got an admission. Reuven just got an admission from Shimon, but now he wants witnesses in order for that admission to be binding, as we spoke about yesterday. So he says, people are around. Let anyone who's awake and anyone who's asleep witness this, with the hope that Reuven would agree to that, with the understanding that most people were asleep, and therefore again there really wouldn't be anything binding in his admission. Amar lo. So to which Shimon said, nope, not agreeing to any type of witnessing of my admission. So Amar Rav Kahana, Amar lo. This is okay. No is no. No is no. So remember, both say this is part of the theme that we see ongoing, that it's interesting, because up until this sugya we would have thought that when a borrower goes ahead and admits that he owes the money to the lender, that would be enough to create a binding admission. Kamash malan, that is not enough, that what one still requires ultimately again is witnessing of that admission. As long as there's no witnessing of that admission, then Allah says it's not binding. So same case, Reuven lent Shimon $1,000, and they're meeting up in a cemetery. And Reuven went ahead and hid witnesses in the cemetery. He hid them. Amrlei manali bi'adecha. So Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me $1,000. Amrlei hein. Shimon says yes. So the Gemara says, Chaye umesi havelach sahadi. Do you agree that the both living and the dead should go ahead and should witness this? In other words, admit this in the presence of the living and the dead. Thinking, of course, that Shimon's going to say, sure, no problem, because who else is in a cemetery other than people who are dead, who can't really do anything from a testimonial perspective? Amar lo. But Shimon still says no. Amar Shimon lo. Shimon says, okay. He said no. No is no. And therefore, again, the admission is not binding. Gemara says, good. Amrlei lo. Amravina v'itim Rav Papa Shmamina meha hadam Rav Yehuda Amarav. So we'll say, so we learn out from all of these cases the following statement of Rav. Sar Shiomer Atem Edai. So again, in order for witnesses to be binding witnesses in witnessing a particular transaction, so the parties involved have to say, you are our witnesses. There has to be witness designation. Lo shna ki amar lova, velo shna ki amar malva. So whether the borrower said this or whether the lender said this in the presence of the borrower and the borrower did not object, that would create a binding or an effective testimonial unit. So time of the Amrlei low. So the reason ultimately again why in these cases it didn't work is because the borrower said, no, I don't want it witnessed. Aval ishasik, but had the borrower been silent, hachanami, ultimately again it would have worked. So I'll say, so essentially what you see from here is as following. An admission by itself is not going to create a binding obligation. It's only an admission witnessed by witnesses. But at the end of the day, even the witnesses only work if the borrower consents to the witnesses being there. If the borrower did not know they were there or did not consent to having them there, then ultimately, again, the borrower's admission is not going to be binding. Quite fascinating. Gemara tells a story. Hahu davakarli kav rashu. There was a guy, they used to call him the Kav of Debt. That was his nickname. Now, Kav, right? Not the kind of nickname that you want. Now, Kav is a large measure. So what does it mean when you call someone a Kav Rashu, a Kav of Debt? That means he owed a lot of people a lot of money. So Amar, Man Masik bi ela ploni uploni. So the guy was upset that people calling him Kav Rashu, the Kav of Debt. He's like, I don't owe a lot of people money. I just happen to owe Reuven $1,000 and Shimon $2,000. That's all I owe. So in other words, see what's happening over here? In the process of trying to clear his name, he admitted that he owed certain monies. Now, of course, the shaila is going to be, what's the status of those admissions? So the Gemara says, Tavo Ladina. So sure enough, what happens? Reuven and Shimon bring him to Beis Din. Because Reuven's like, you just admitted you owe me 1,000. Shimon says, you just admitted you owe me 2,000. So they brought him to Beis Din. Before Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman, Adam asay shalo lahashbiya as asma. So also you've seen this before. Sometimes people say that they owe other people money in order to avoid a perception that they're wealthy. So in other words, so what Rav Nachman was saying was, you can't go ahead and make this guy, Kav Rashu guy, you can't make him chayiv to pay Reuven and Shimon any money based on this admission, because A, it wasn't made in front of witnesses, he didn't designate witnesses, and number two, it's possible that sometimes people go ahead and claim that they owe other people money in order to diminish their personal appearance of wealth. This is another story. There was another guy, these nicknames are great. This other guy, they called him the mouse that sleeps on money. I will say, now what does that mean? That's another name for someone who's very cheap. Very cheap. So right, you've got Kav Rashu, we got to use these, right? So you've got to bring these back, right? We've got Kav Rashu, the guy who's a Kav of debt, just like a mountain of debt. And then there's the other guy, Achbari Deshachav Adinari, the mouse that sleeps on money, that's the miser. That's the miser. He just holds all of his money to himself. So Kika Shachiv, so listen to this, as he was dying, this guy said, Planya o planya masku bezuzi. So ultimately, again, listen to this. So we'll call him the miser. The miser, when he was dying, he said, by the way, I owe money to Reuven and Shimon. But he said, he made the declarative statement. So the Gemara busted the shachiv, asu tavo liyarshin. So obviously, after the miser dies, so what happens? So Reuven and Shimon come and petition the Yarshim to pay the money. Like, your father, the mouse that sleeps on money, your father admitted that he owes us money. So they came to Beis Din to claim it from the Yarshim. Also like Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, so they brought the case for Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, Amar Lahu, Ki Amri Adam Asr Shalom Lahashbias Atzmo Hani Mili Mechayim, Aval Achamisa Lo. So we'll say, listen to this. So they came up for Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi said, the only time that we say that a person will go ahead and admit to, or I should say, the only time that a person will say that he owes money, even if he doesn't, in order to go ahead and diminish his own appearance of wealth, is when he's alive. When he's alive. But a person doesn't make that type of statement when he's going to die. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi paskind that the miser's admission is a valid admission, and he instructed the Yarshim, the inheritors, the children, to pay the debts to Reuven and to Shimon. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows. So pro palga. So what happens? The kids, the Yarshim paid half. Okay, so they listened to Rabbi Yossi and they paid half of the debt. They didn't pay the other half. So Tavo Ladina Leidach Palga. So Reuven and Shimon brought the Yarshim to Beis Din for the other half. So what happened? Also look at Rabbi Chia. This time they didn't come up for Rabbi Yossi, they came up for Rabbi Chia. It doesn't seem to be for any particular reason, just the way that it happened. So the Gemara says, Amar lahu kishim sha'adam asoy shelo lahashbias atzmo kach adam asoy shelo lahashbias banav. Say Allah hasbias, sorry. So we'll say, interestingly enough, this time Rabbi Chia paskin, no, it's not true. The same way that a person will say that he owes money to other people, not because he actually owes money, but only to diminish his own personal appearance of wealth, sometimes a person will do that for his kids also. When he wants to diminish the inheritance pot, right? Or at least, optically diminish the perception, right, that the kids are inheriting a lot of money. So I'll say, oh, you know what, this is not all my money. Some of it belongs to Reuven, some of it belongs to Shimon, but it's not an actual statement. Therefore, this is how Rabbi Chia paskin. And therefore, Rabbi Chia said that the miser's deathbed statement is not really binding. And therefore, again, he instructed the kids they don't have to pay the other half. Amrulei, Nazel v'nehajalhu. So I'll say, so then the kids asked, the Yarshim asked, so again, shouldn't Reuven and Shimon be obligated to pay back the other half? Because remember, the Yarshim paid 50% of the quote-unquote debt. So shouldn't Reuven and Shimon be able to have to refund the other half? Amalu kvar hora zakim. No, listen, Rebbe Paskind. In other words, essentially what Rabbi Chia was saying was almost like it's two different dinei Torah. There was the first din Torah that came before Rebbe, right? And that he paskind that we take the statement of the miser seriously, and therefore he instructed the kids to pay. Kids paid half, and then for the other half there was a second din Torah. Rabbi Chia says, I say don't take the statement seriously, but we're not going to reverse the original ruling of Rebbe. Okay, incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Hoda bifnei shnayim v'konomi yadan. So we'll say, okay, so now we're transitioning a little bit into a different sugya. So right, Reuven admits in front of witnesses. Or I should say, right, Reuven admits in front of witnesses that he owes Shimon $1,000, right? The Konomi Adan, and they did a kinyan, right? So to make this admission a binding admission, Kosvin, ultimately again, so now the witnesses are empowered to write down this transaction. Now Rashi says over here, Konomi Adal, Kosvin Shtar Hoda, V'afapi Shalo Amar Kisvu, the Stam Kinyan Liksiva Omed. So we'll say, watch what's happening over here. In this case, Reuven is admitting to Shimon in the presence of witnesses, I, Reuven, owe you $1,000. So now that there are witnesses there, right? And not only that, they did a kinyan. The kinyan essentially makes the admission binding. When that happens, so halacha l'maisa, the witnesses are then empowered to write down what's called the shtar hodah. Shtar hodah is a document of admission. What does it say? Essentially, it says Reuven admitted in front of us that he owes Shimon $1,000. So they are empowered to write down that document, even though what? Even though Reuven did not ask them to do so. Right? Reuven didn't ask them to write down anything, but because there was a kinyan itself lends itself to be committed to writing. Incredible. But if he made this admission in front of three people, even if there wasn't a kinyan, so Rav Amar Kosvin. So Rav says, the witness, because now this is like a beis din in front of three, they can write it down even without a kinyan. Ravasi said, no, they can't write it. They can't write it without an explicit, either with a kinyan or explicit instruction to write it down. So so this case happened. So I'll say, so now interestingly enough, in the case of where, let's just go through this again, in the case where Reuven is admitting his liability in front of two witnesses, and they make a kinyan to make his admission binding, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, that admission is committed to writing. Everyone agrees on that, right? Then halacha l'maisa afterwards, what about in presence of three, where there was no kinyan? That's a machlokes. Rav says they can write down the transaction or write down the admission, and ultimately again Rav Asi says no, you can't. So Rav says Hava of the Rav lahad Rav Asi. So I'll say one time this type of case happened, and Rav himself yielded to Rav Asi, and therefore again they did not write down shtar hodah. Amar of Adabar Ava ha udisa zimnin de kasem zimnin de lo kasvin. So Surah says shtar odisa. Odisa is a document of admission. That's all. It's a document that says Reuven admitted that he owed Shimon $1,000. And by the way, you could do an Odisa. Interestingly enough, Kinyan Odisa there's also a Kinyan Odisa. A Kinyan Odisa is just simply when you admit that you owe something, right? Or you admit to a certain reality. So the Gemara says one time it happened. Right, the Gemara says, sometimes this Odisa, this document of admission, sometimes you commit it to writing, sometimes you don't. So so ultimately, we'll say, listen to this. If there were a group of people gathered and Reuven admitted in front of them that he owed Shimon money, so because Reuven did not go ahead and gather the group, so the group can't automatically commit it to writing without either a kinyan or being instructed to do so. Kinefin hu ihu ihu kasvinon. But if Reuven gathered the group, right? If Reuven himself gathered the group, so that's indicative of the fact that he wants the group to witness his admission, and therefore again they could commit the admission to writing. Rava Rava says, "Afilu kanfinu ihu lo kasvinon ad amrluhu have il alai dayani." Rava said, no, even if Reuven himself gathers the group, halacha l'maisa, they cannot commit the admission to writing until he explicitly says, be my beis din. Once he says, be my beis din, then halacha l'maisa, they could commit the transaction or the admission to writing. Incredible. Ad kavia duchta v'shalchi umezamnile lebeidina. So this is interesting. Rav Ashi says, no. A beis din, or I should say yes, a beis din has the ability to go ahead and commit things to writing, commit admission to writing, but that's only if they function as a beis din. What's the definition of functioning as a beis din? They have an established place where they operate out of, right? They've gone ahead and summoned people to din. So that's a beis din. That's a beis din. And that type of beis din, when they go ahead and witness something, they have the right and the ability to commit something to writing. Let's say Reuven admits that he owes Shimon metaltlin. He admits that he owes him a watch. So what's the halacha? Ultimately, again, and Reuven did a kinyan, that can be committed to writing. But if not, you can't go ahead and commit it to writing. What about by now? That's my metaltal. What about karka? Right? Reuven admits that he sold Shimon a field. So now what happens? And there was no accompanying kinyan to cement that admission. Can that transaction be committed to writing? See, I just want to point out to you what the tension is over here, and it's quite fascinating because intuitively you see this stuff and you're wondering why are we even having this discussion? If Reuven admits something to Shimon, should that an admission is an admission? So of course, write it down, do whatever. So remember, what's the tension? The tension over is that Chazal understood human nature is that it's going to sound crazy. Sometimes people say stuff that's not true, right? I know it's a shocker, right? In other words, and even in the world of admissions, sometimes people say that they owe other people stuff in order to diminish the perception of their own wealth. That's what's happening over here. So therefore, so because you have this tension, the Gemara is trying to figure out, so when can we commit something to writing? When can't we commit something to writing? Obviously, if the admitter is empowering the group to commit it to writing, there's nothing to talk about. These shilas come up in cases where the admitter, that's the right word, the admitter? Yeah, the admitter. The person making the admission, okay, yeah, the admitter, right, is not saying anything. What do we do in those cases? So that's our vimlav inkosin. So what happens if again Reuven admits that he owes Shimon money? And ultimately, again, Stephen, you can come up here. That's all right. You're not sitting back over there. Right? So now what happens? So what happens if Reuven went ahead and admitted to Shimon that he owes him karka, but ultimately, again, no kinyan was done. So what is the halacha? What's the halacha under those circumstances? So the Gemara says, Ameimar Amar Ein Kosvin. Ameimar says, ultimately, again, you can't commit it to writing. Marzutra Amar Kosvin. Marzutra says yes. Now both say, remember again, this is karka. So karka is a much bigger deal than metaltalin. So what do you do under those circumstances? V'hilchasa Kosvin. So both say this is an interesting breakthrough. What's the breakthrough over here? That if Reuven admits that he owes Shimon karka, so that is a very substantive type of admission. So because of that, that can be committed to writing, even if what? Even if halacha l'maisa there was no instruction to do so. So that's a big breakthrough over here. Okay, Ravina Ikla Lidamharia. So Ravina went to a place called Damharia. Okay, Amli Rav Dimi Bar Rav Huna Midamharia l'Ravina Metaltli v'Isnu Beinahumai. What happens if Reuven admits that he owes Shimon metaltlin and the metaltlin is extant? It's right there. So the Gemara says, Amrlei kimikakai dami. So existing metaltlin or extant metaltlin is just like karka, which we'll say, again, what's the logic? The whole chap with karka is that when you admit that you own karka, owe karka to someone or sold karka to someone, that's right there. That's right there. So an admission like that is incredibly substantive, and that's why it lends itself to be written down even without any instruction from the admitter. So the Gemara wants to suggest that metaltalin, that's extant, has that same status. Rav Ashi Omar, Rav Ashi says, no, because metaltalin is very different. Why? Because metaltalin, even though it's extant, it's not collected. Right? There's still another major process over here that has to be done in order to make the metaltalin shimons, which means it has to be collected. So because it has to be collected, therefore, admission is not enough to allow it to be written down. Hahu odisa delohava kasav ba. So let's listen to this. Then there was a shtar odisa. So remember again, a shtar odisa is a document that contains an admission of fact. Right? It's essentially odisa is a declarative statement that tells you that something occurred. Something occurred. So there was the shtar odisa delokasav ba. Amar lanu ksuva v'chasmu v'havulei. Supposed to listen to this. So normally in a shtar odisa, what would be written? What would be written? Reuven admitted to us in front of Shimon that he owes $1,000 and instructed us to convey the money to Shimon. It's an example of a shtar odisa. So let's say you had a shtar odisa, but inside the shtar it didn't have the phraseology of, and Reuven told us to write this down in a document. It doesn't have that phrase. So what happens? Abai Rav Damar Tabayu. Hainu Reish Lakish. This is Reish Lakish's case. What's Reish Lakish's case? Amar Reish Lakish. Chazaka in Eidim Chosim Al Shtar El Imke Nasa Gadol. Right? Nasa Gadol. So both say in general, Reish Lakish operates at the following premise: witnesses don't sign on something unless they know it to be bona fide and correct. That's the assumption. That's what the signatures of witnesses do. So in this case over here, they're saying, right, so witnesses will not commit their signature to a document if they don't know that the parties involved are adults. So too again, Reish Lakish says, if you see signatures on a shtar, assuming that we could validate those signatures, the assumption is people don't sign on something unless they know it to be correct. So maskef Rapapi v'Item Ravuna Breid Rav Yoshua mi ikamidi da ana lo yadinan v'safri debei dina yadi. So this is interesting. So Ravuna Breid Yoshua said, well, again, this makes it sound like that the Sofrim, the scribes of Beis Din, are more knowledgeable than us, the Rabbanim, to which the Gemara says, Shalulu l'safri da'abai v'yadi, l'safri d'Rav v'yadi, but sure enough, they asked this halacha to the Sofrim of the Beis Din of Abai, and they knew it. Sofrim of Rava, and they knew it. Hahu odisa, the havakas of Bei, duchrin piskami, bosai top of Lamed, 30a. So there was this shtar odisa, and on the shtar odisa, it wrote in it, sorry, let's first just take a look at the last Rashi on Chav Tes Amud Beis. So Rashi says over here, duchrin piskami lo havakasav ba zikaron edas balashon edim elalashon zichron dvarim v'hulashon dayanim. So they had a shtar odisa, but normally again a shtar odisa is written from a testimonial perspective. Here, this shtar odisa was written more from a judicial perspective, like judges recounting what it is that they saw. So the Gemara says v'chol top of Lamed 38 v'chol lishna de beidina. And it had much more of like a court document type of wording to it. And it didn't say, but I will say, but here's what's interesting. So this document, listen to what happened over here. This document was written more from the perspective of like a Beis Din overseeing a process than it is by a shtar odisa. Right? Shtar odisa normally is people acting in the capacity of witnessing a transaction, usually doing a kinyan as well, and recording everything that happened in a document. This document over here was written much more from the perspective of a Beis Din overseeing a transaction. What's the problem? The problem is witnesses are 2, a Beis Din is 3. So yet, again, the problem is only 2 witnesses signed on it. Now, if 2 witnesses would have signed on it, listen to this. Now again, I will say, here's the problem. In a Beis Din, you could have a Beis Din document that's signed by 2, right? How can you have a Beis Din document signed by 2? If you say, there were 3 of us, and one is no longer. That will say now, no longer could mean a variety of different things. It could mean he died. It could also just mean he dropped out of the judicial process at some point. But the point over here is you're making it clear that at some point there was a Beis Din. So essentially what you have over here is a document written like a Beis Din document, but only signed by 2 witnesses. There's no Beis Din. So what do? So Ravina Reish Lakish. So Ravina wanted to say, oh, this is the case of Reish Lakish. Or what does Reish Lakish say? Reish Lakish says witnesses don't sign on something. People don't sign on stuff unless they know that it is bona fide and correct. Rav Nasan bar Ami, Kol ki agavno chayshina lebezdin toin. Now, we'll say in this case we do have another concern. What's the concern over here? The concern is not every bezdin knows what they're doing. We'll say this again. That's just the reality. And you had, especially in different places, sometimes you didn't necessarily have erudite Talmidei Chachamim. You do the best that you can, and not every bezdin knows what they're doing. So Lamaisa, the Gemara says, no. Here we have to be concerned that if you see essentially what appears to be a judicial document, and it's not signed by 3 judges, it's only signed by 2 witnesses, you have to be concerned that maybe someone here does not know what they're doing. If ultimately, again, it says Beidina, says a Bezdin, then ultimately, again, nothing else is going to be necessary. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. V'dilma bezdin chatzafu. But 1 second, maybe it's a chutzpahdik bezdin. What's a chutzpahdik bezdin? Damar Shmuel Shnaim shedanu dinei and din el shikru bezdin chatzaf. So remember, we had this in the beginning of the Masechta. Shmuel said that halacha l'maisa, technically speaking, 2 people could serve as a bezdin. But if they do so, that is called an arrogant or a chutzpahdik bezdin. So both say, so technically speaking, it works. Technically, it works, but it's considered to be a chutzpahdik bezdin. So the Gemara says, the kasav beidina de rabna ashi. No, where it writes that we are like a bezdin of Rav Ashi. So what they're doing is apparently like the Rav Ashi bezdin was like a gold standard bezdin. So they're indicating in the document that we are operating as a bona fide bezdin. V'dilma rabbanan tebe Rav Ashi kishmol sirlu. But maybe the rabbis of Rav Ashi's bezdin or Rav Ashi's yeshiva held like Shmuel. What does Shmuel say? That a bezdin of 2 technically works, but it's just called the bezdin chatzuf. To which the Gemara says, Dichsiv bo va'amralan rabna ashi. Where it says ultimately, again, it says in the document itself, and Rav Ashi told us to write this. Rashi says over here, last white line of Rashi, V'amarlan Rabna Ashi lichtov kach dechevandu hayasham mistamalot siva lifachos mishlosha lichtov. So we'll say, essentially, the document says that someone of a high standing instructed them to do this. Once someone of a high standing instructed them to do this, the assumption is that the process is playing out correctly. Okay, Tanabanan. Amrlahan echad. So I was supposed to listen to this case. Very interesting. So we'll say 4 lines up from before it gets wide. Tanabanan. Amrlahan echad. One guy says, Anira isi avichem shehitmin maos b'shida tevo migdal. Okay, supposed to listen to this case over here. So a witness comes along, and witness says to, let's say, Reuven and Shimon. Right, Reuven and Shimon, I saw your father Yaakov. Shehitmin maos b'shida teva umigdal. I saw your father hide money. Shida teva umigdal means like in a chest, in a carriage. Right, I saw him hide money somewhere. Va'amar shal ploni hein, shal meiser sheni hein. And I saw. So the witness is coming forward. He's telling the kids now. Reuven and Shimon didn't know about this money. So witness is coming along and saying, "I will tell you, I saw your father. Go ahead and hide money somewhere, and but your father said this money, it belongs to Yehuda, or this money is Meiser Sheni." So what's the halacha bosai? So now again, obviously the case over here is where the kids find the money. So in other words, witness was telling the truth, there is money. What's the shaila? The shaila is the money someone else's money? Is it Meiser Sheni money, right? Someone else's / Meiser Sheni, right? Or could the kids claim it as their own? So what's the halacha? Babayis lo amar klum besada dvarav kayamin. So this is very interesting. If the money is found in the house, the statement of the witness is meaningless. But if it's found in the field, then we believe the witness. So we'll say, what's the logic over here? The logic over here is if the money's in the field, the witness could have taken it for himself. Right? It's open, it's accessible. Could have taken it for himself. So therefore, again, because he didn't take it for himself, and now he's claiming that it either belongs, the father said it belongs to someone else, or it's Meiser Sheni, we believe him. But if the money was in the house, meaning so the witness had no access to it, in other words, in the house of the kids, the witness had no access to it, therefore the witness is not believed. In other words, and the money is considered to be the possession, the inheritance of the kids. Very interesting. First, why line of both, klalo shal davar, the rule is like this: kol shabiyadol litlan dvarav kayamin, ein biyadol. Anytime that a witness has the ability to take the money for himself, so he is believed to qualify the nature of the money. Where he doesn't have the ability to take it for himself, he is not believed to qualify the nature of the money. Fascinating. It's almost like amigo. almost like amigo. Very interesting. Listen to this. Listen to this. Second case, the kids. Reuben and Shimon see their father, Yaakov, hiding money, right, in a chest, in a carriage, in a tower. So this is what happens. And the father says to his kids, by the way, this money, it belongs to Reuven. It belongs to Yehuda, another guy. Or he claims that it's Meiser Sheni money. So what's the halacha? Im kimoser dvarav kayamin. So ultimately, right? V'im kima'arim lamer klum. So this is very interesting, I will say. So now what happens if the father, right? If the father seems to be genuine in his statement, then the kids are able to believe it. I will say, now obviously the part that's not written over here is the father then dies, the kids get this money. So the shaila is, what do we do? What do we do with this money? So if it appears that the father was genuine in his statement, then halacha l'maisa, we go ahead and we listen to the father. If at the end of the day it appears that the father is marim just means that, he's being a little bit sneaky, then we don't listen to the father. And again, the kids could keep the money for themselves. Very fascinating. Supposed to listen to this. Supposed to listen to this. Father died. What happened? The kids knew that their father left them money, right? Reuven and Shimon. Yaakov died. Reuven and Shimon knew, or Reuven knew that his father left them money. What was the problem? Reuven couldn't find the money. Just couldn't find it. So what happened? Supposed to listen to this. And then what happens? Reuven has a dream. And the Bala Cholam. Who's the Bala Cholam? Bala Cholam, Rashi says, is Sar Hamare Chalomos Balayla. The Malach, who's in charge of angels. Who's in charge of dreams. So the Malach who's in charge of dreams gave Reuven a dream, right? And Reuven dreamt about the money. And in this dream, the Malach told him the location of the money, but also told him, by the way, the money's Meiser Sheni. Reuven wakes up in the morning. What does he do? Washes the Tfilas Adayim. Of course, first comes the Daf Yomi, David Shachris, and then afterwards looks for the money. And what happens? Finds the money. So we'll say, what's the shaila? The shaila now is, what's the status of that money? Ze haya maisa. So this happened. Va'amru divrei chalomos lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. And again, the psak was, dreams don't have a halachic impact. And therefore, again, essentially, Reuven was allowed to keep the money as chulin, as regular unconsecrated money. So I will say many, many, many beautiful things to say about this Gemara. So first, again, I will say, it's interesting that you see a lot about a person, about what they dream about, which is an incredibly important yisod. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh makes this observation that Yaakov Avinu, when he left his father's home, remember again, the first dream that Yaakov Avinu had was about the sulam, the ladder. Sulam Mutzarzo Malachei Elokim Olim the Yardim Bo. And he goes up and down the ladder. If you notice again later on in the parish, Yaakov Avinu has another dream. Right? What was the other dream? The second dream was about sheep. Right? He dreamt, that was when, again, the speckled sheep, the brown sheep, all the different sheep. Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, you see something so amazing. Same person, in the beginning of the parasha, was dreaming about malachim, dreaming about angels, spiritual ascension, going up and down the ladder. And by the end of the dream, what is he dreaming about? By the end of the parasha, he's dreaming about money. Dreaming about money. So Hashem HaKadosh says, what do you attribute this distinction to? Lavan. This is what happens when you put yourself in negative circumstances. Yaakov Avinu had no choice. He had to be there. But you see the impact of your surroundings on you. When he's in the house, when he's growing up in the house of Yitzchak Avinu, his father, he dreams about spiritual greatness. When he's living in the house of Lavan for over 2 decades, his dreams fundamentally change to monetary greatness. So I will say, so just an incredible use of sometimes what we dream about says a lot, obviously, again, especially if you go with the idea, dreams are a manifestation of our subconscious, a lot of the stuff that we actively suppress throughout the day. It is interesting to see kind of what comes out when the mechanisms of suppression are no longer there. What do you dream about? What is rattling around in your subconscious? What's the stuff that you aspire to when all of your suppression mechanisms are no longer there? Tremendous litmus test of where we're holding in life. But ultimately, that last statement is so incredible. Divrei chalomos lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. Dreams, essentially, are meaningless. Right? They're not beneficial, they're not detrimental, they're nothing. They'll say, how can you say that? Dreams are so beautiful, and dreams are so incredible, and dreams are the very engine for accomplishment, but that's just it. Dreams are only meaningful if they lead to accomplishment. The problem with dreams is so often in life, they just remain divrei chalomos. That's what the Gemara is saying. Divrei chalomos, if all you have are dreams, if that's all you got, if all you have are divrei chalomos and no action, I've never translated my dreams into something concrete, lo malin v'lo moridin. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's not bad. It's not bad, but it's also not good. If divrei chalomos turn into maisim tovim, right? If your dreams turn into concrete activity, that is profound. But if my dreams always remain simple divrei chalomos, just understand it's very nice, but lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. It does not move the needle on your life at all. Incredible, incredible. Okay, let's go back there. Shnayim Zakai. Suppose I remember again, the Mishnah then said, where was the Mishnah? It's like a blur. All right, Baruch Hashem. Okay, there was a Mishnah. There was a Mishnah, right? In the Mishnah, where was it? Oh, just the page back? Yeah, thank you, right? So I remember again, the Mishnah said as follows. So the Mishnah said, I'm resisting the reality that pretty sure I actually need glasses. But okay, okay. So the Gemara says as follows. So what ended up happening? So the Gemara says, Beis Din reaches a verdict. Beis Din reaches a verdict. And then it says that, and then, good. Good. Ad shiur good. So both after the whole right. Shnaim omrim zakah, v'shnaim omrim echad mechayev. Afilu shnaim zakah, shnaim echad. Good. Gamru es hadavar. So good. So what says the Gemara says over here. So they go through the entire process of adjudicating the case. So what happens? The Gemara says michtav heichi ksivi. So the Mishnah makes it sound like they write down the din. So what are they writing? The Gemara Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai. So we'll say what is the verbiage of a psak? So let's say again, Reuven comes in, Reuven and Shimon come to Beis Din. Reuven says, Shimon owes me $1,000. Shimon says, I owe you nothing. So let's say the Beis Din goes ahead and is split on their decision, but they ultimately end up siding with Reuven. So what's the halacha? So how do they write it? How do they write the shtar? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai, Reish Lakish Amar Ploni uploni mezakin, uploni uploni mechayvin. So listen to this. So Rabbi Yochanan says all the statement writes is we find Reuven innocent. Okay, we'll call it innocent. Or we side with Reuven. Reish Lakish says no. The document actually says some of the judges ruled in favor of Reuven. Some of the judges didn't rule in favor of Reuven. Rabbi Elazar says, midivreyan nizdake ploni. From their words, or right, midivreyan, based on the psak over here, from the words of the dayanim, so Reuven has been found right. Suppose I say so machlokes in terms of the verbiage used by the document, the decision document. My benau. So what's the nafkamina between these opinions? So let's listen to this. So let's say it turns out. Listen to this case. So it turns out that the dayanim were wrong. They misjudged. So we're going to discuss about what level of liability occurs when they're wrong. But in this case over here, dayanim are wrong. They judged the case erroneously. So what's this? So now they're obligated to make the aggrieved party whole. So what about the judge? So are the judges who ruled erroneously obligated to go ahead and make up for the portion of the judge who ruled correctly? So let's say there was a panel of 3. 2 of them ruled in favor of Reuven. 1 of them ruled against. It turns out that, and therefore the majority opinion was Reuven's right. It turns out that Reuven was wrong. So what's the halacha over here? Tilmad, Gemara says, Dilman da'amar zakai mishalim. So the one who says, ultimately again, that halacha l'maisa, the Beis Din as a whole ruled innocence, then everyone's got to pay a part. Well, ploni mezakin, ploni mechayvin lo mishalim. But the one who says ultimately again that halacha l'maisa, that we know we indicate that it's a split decision. So therefore again the judge who ruled correctly doesn't have to participate in any type of compensation. Zakai mishalim. But the one who says ultimately again zakai mishalim, right? Lema luhu ila diditzai sisun asun nami lo shalimunasan. So again we'll say, but why should the judge who ruled correctly have to pay anything? At the end of the day, again, he could say to the guys, Chevra, had you listened to me, none of you would have to pay anything. So in other words, the judge who ruled correctly, why should he have to pay any type of damages to the aggrieved party? Ella ika benayu. Here's the nafkamina. L'shalume inhu mansa didei. You're right. The judge who ruled correctly doesn't have to, it sounds like, judge who rules correctly doesn't have to pay at all. The shaila is, do the other judges, i.e. the ones who ruled incorrectly, are they obligated to pay the portion of the judge who ruled correctly? right? Because at the end of the day, the Beis Din caused Ruvain a loss, or Shimon a loss. So Laman Damar Zakai Mishalmi. According to the one who says that the way we write the Psak Din is the Beis Din exonerated, which makes it sound like it's the whole Beis Din. So therefore, the judges who ruled incorrectly are obligated to pay the portion of even the judge who ruled correctly. Or the Gemara says Laman Damar Ploni Uploni Mizakin Uploni Uploni Mechayvin Lo Mishalmi. But the one who says no, that we indicate in the decision that it was a split decision, right? In the split decision, so therefore only the judges who ruled erroneously are obligated to pay, and they're only obligated to pay their portion. But they're not obligated to pay the portion of the judge who ruled correctly. And the judge who ruled correctly is also not obligated to pay anything because he ruled correctly. But again, I will say it's interesting. The one who says that we just put it out, we put out the decision as a complete decision. Why can't the judges who ruled correctly say to the judge who ruled incorrectly, it's your fault. Had you not sat in on the Din Torah, there would have never been a binding Psak Halacha, because there would have only been two. And had there not been a binding Psak Halacha, we would not be obligated to pay. To which the Gemara says, Ella ika benayu mishum lo selich Rachel ba'amecha. This is incredible. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zakai mishum lo selich Rachel. Rabbi Yochanan says, whenever a Beis Din issues a decision, the decision has to be written in a uniform fashion. It has to say the Beis Din found Ruvain innocent. Because if it indicates any level of dissension, what's going to happen? That's going to lead to speculation about which judges ruled in which way and could potentially fuel Lashon Hara. Reish Lakish Amar, Ploni Uploni Mizakin, Uploni Uploni Mechayvin, Mishum Nemechse Kishikra. So Reish Lakish says, no, you have to indicate, if it's a split decision, you have to indicate it. Why? Because if you just make it look like a uniform decision, then that's really misleading. That's not the case. And therefore, Mechse Kishikra, the document will look fraudulent and false if you don't indicate the split decision. So we'll say, Rabbi Lazar, Islay Demar ve'Islay Demar. And Rabbi Lazar ultimately, again, holds of components for both of them. Hilchach, Chasi Hachi. Therefore, again, the best way to write the document is how? Midivrehen Nizdake Ploni. Based on their deliberations, Ruvain was found innocent. So I will say, what's the beauty of that lashon? The beauty of that lashon is, on one hand, it puts forward a uniform psak. It says the Beis Din is paskening that Ruvain is right. But that lashon of midivreim, from their words or from their deliberations, what does it sound like? What does that clearly indicate to you? They were deliberations. What could deliberations also mean? That it wasn't a uniform opinion. It wasn't unanimous. So therefore, again, I will say, so on one hand, we want the document to look genuine. So therefore, again, if there's not unanimity, we want the document to, on one hand, indicate that there's not unanimity. On the other hand, we can't start naming which judges ruled which way, because halacha l'maisa, what happens? Then that creates lashon hara. So therefore, we use this lashon to indicate there wasn't unanimity in the decision, but this is the uniform decision of the Beis Din. Incredible. When Beis Din was ready to deliver their psak, they would bring in the people. So the Gemara says, Laman, who are they bringing in? So if you want to say it's the litigants, Hasam Kaimi, the litigants were already there. They're present, El Edim. Rather, what it means is we bring back the witnesses. Keman, Lo Krabi Nasan, not Krabi Nasan. How so? Desanya, the Olam Eno Dis Mistrafes Ashir Shnei Ke'echad. So now we're going to delve a little bit into the halachos of testimony. In general, again, the Brisa says like this. Tanakama says that halacha l'maisa, witnesses cannot form a testimonial unit unless, of course, they see the same event together. They must witness the event together. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Silber Omer afilum b'zeh achar zeh. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, no. They don't have to see the event together. Even if they see the same event consecutively or separately, that's fine as well, as long as what? Ad sheyiru shnehem ke'echad. I'm sorry. So Yoshua says like this. They don't have to see the event together, but they must testify in Beis Din together. Okay, so interesting idea. They could see the same event separately, but they have to testify in Beis Din together. Rabbi Nassan says no. Omer shomen dvar shal zayom ukishel chaver lemachar shomen es dvar. Rabbi Shimon says no. They could even go ahead and come consecutively to Beis Din. So Rabbi says, so again, interesting machlokas here. So Tanakama, they have to see the event together. So if you have to see the event together, you shouldn't have to testify about it together. Rabbi Shimon Karcha, they don't have to see it together, but they have to testify about it together. Rabbi Nassan, they can even testify about it separately. So now the Gemara is suggesting, if the Mishnah is telling me that we bring the witnesses back together, that's not like Rabbi Nassan. Because according to Rabbi Nassan, you don't really need the witnesses to be together at all. To which the Gemara says, no, no, not true. When we say we bring them back into Beis Din for the verdict, who's the them? The them ultimately is the litigants. So this is how, again, the tzaddikim of Yerushalayim used to do things. So we'll say this is how a Beis Din worked. Now, when it says Nikiyah Hadas refers to those people who wanted their processes to just be beyond reproach. Right? They wanted it to be good. So how did they do it? So they would bring in the Baalei Din, the litigants. V'shomin divrehen, they would hear their words. Umachnisen es ha'edim v'shomin divrehen, then they'd bring in the witnesses and hear their testimony. Umotzien osan l'chutz, then they take everybody out of Beis Din. V'nosin b'davar, ultimately again the dayanim themselves would go ahead and then kind of handle it, right? They'd go back and forth. Kamra sadavar machnisen osan. So and then ultimately again, when they finished their deliberations, they brought back in the Baalei Din. In other words, I will say the Beis Din has to have an ability to go ahead and discuss the case. And the best way to do that, of course, is how? Not in the presence of the litigants. In other words, get all of your information and then do your deliberations in private. And when they finish their deliberations, bring back in the litigants. But we learn, but it says, the Brisa says that when they would finish their deliberations, they'd bring back in the witnesses, not the litigants. That's not like Rabbi Nassan. Okay, so therefore Rabbi say again, it's not clear exactly who it is that we are bringing back, right? Bringing back. Now, it seems to be that the Rambam Paskin is like that Brisa, that the bringing back is a reference to the litigants. Right? Because we don't really need the witnesses anymore. What we need now are the litigants. So again, bring in the witnesses, bring in the litigants, ask all the questions you need to ask, separately, right? But together. And then everybody's out, deliberations occur, then call back the litigants for the decision. Okay, so I will say now, the Gemara is going to jump back a little bit. So the Gemara says, Gufa, so let's go back for just a moment. This was an interesting machlokes, right? So we had Tanakama and Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. Tanakama held, in order for witnesses to form together a testimonial unit, what has to happen? Halacha l'maisa, they have to see the event together. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha says, not at all. They could go ahead and what? Even see it. They don't have to see it together, but what? They have to testify together in Beis Din. So the Gemara says, what's the machlokes over here? What's the machlokes over here? Now, I both say, what's the machlokes over here? It could be about a pasuk, or it could be about logic. So if you want to say it's a machlokes and logic, here we go. So the Gemara says, Amar de kamasid hai, lo kamasid hai. Umar de kamasid hai, lo kamasid hai. So ultimately, again, the Tanakhama will say like this. How could two people form a testimonial unit if they're not witnessing the same event together? Because maybe at the end of the day, they're not even seeing the same event. In other words, the only way to know that witnesses are actually witnessing the same exact event is how? For them to actually see it together. Otherwise, so for example, let's say again, right? They say we saw Reuven go ahead and lend Shimon money. So again, if they're not seeing it together, maybe Reuven made 2 loans to Shimon. Maybe it's 2 different transactions. How do you know? So the Gemara says as follows. V'idach, the other opinion will say, Amona ba'alma tarvayo kamasid. To which and again, so we'll say that's the Tanakama. On the other, Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha will say, no, we trust ultimately again that Allah Chalamaysa, they are testifying about the same loans. That's the Svara logic. So the Gemara says, I say the other possibility is Kra. It's based on a pasuk. What's the pasuk? Tichsev v'hu eid o ra'a o yada. Pasuk says he is a witness, and he saw, or he knew. Since the pasuk says ultimately again, lo yakum eid, a singular witness will not give testimony. Any other shu echad, I know that eid is singular. Why does that have to say echad? So Gemara says, echad ze bana av. This case of binyan, I both say binyan av is like a paradigm. So Gemara says, kol makom shneimar eid hari kan shnayim. Whenever the Torah uses the word eid really refers to 2 witnesses. Ad sheyifartacha kasuv echad, until the Torah goes out of its way to tell you one. Va'afki rachmana b'lashon chad l'meimar eid ad dechazu tarvayu kichad. That ultimately, again, when is testimony good? Only when the 2 witnesses see the same event as one. They witness it together. However, again, the Gemara says, v'idach v'hu eid ora o yada mikol makom. So therefore, I will say, halacha l'maisa, what we have over here is a fundamental machlokes. Now, again, remember, the Gemara over here is not addressing Rabbi Nassan, because Rabbi Nassan was the 3rd opinion. But essentially, what we have over here is the machlokes in the Tanakama and Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. Tanakama is saying witnesses only form together as a testimonial unit if they see the event together. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, even if they don't see it together, it's fine, as long as what? As long as ultimately, again, they testify together. Now, the Gemara said, what's the machlokes Tanakam and Rabbi Shmuel Silber? Either it's based on logic or it's based on interpretation of the pasuk. Now, again, for our purposes, there's also a third opinion of Rabbi Nassan, and Rabbi Nassan says they don't have to see it together, they don't even have to testify together. So we'll see that Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Shmuel Silber, that Allah Chamaisa witnesses need not actually witness the event together, right? But they must testify together in Beis in order to form a testimonial unit. Now, the exact framework of that we'll have to see. Let's go a little bit weiter. Says the Gemara. So remember again, that this is Rabbi Shmuel Silber. So Rabbi Shmuel Silber said, even though the witnesses don't have to see it together, but they have to testify together in Beis Din. Now came along Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Nassan Omer Shomin Dvar Shalzeh Hayom Ukeshev Acharei Lamachar Shomin Dvar. Rabbi Nassan even went even further. Rabbi Nassan said, no, not only do they not have to see it together, but even what? They could even give their testimony separately in Beis Din, right? Witness 1 could come on Wednesday, and witness 2 could come on Thursday, and they could still combine. So, what's the machlokes over here? It could be either logic or a pasuk. Maybe it's a svara. So one opinion says, listen, whenever a singular witness comes, a singular witness at most is only coming to make someone chayav a shvuah. Right? But a singular witness can never generate a monetary obligation. And therefore, the first opinion will say, when an Eid Echad shows up in Beis Din, his power is capped at obligating someone in a shvuah, never to make them chayiv in money. V'idach atu ki asu bahadi hadadi bechad puma kamasid el mitzarfina lahu. So the other opinion will say, look, when two witnesses show up in Beis Din in general, are they talking out of one mouth? They're not talking out of one mouth. Each of them has their own mouth. And what do? We combine their statements. What does it matter if you combine two witnesses into a testimonial unit when they're showing up at the same time, or if they're showing up on consecutive days? So we'll say that's the svara. The other possibility is they're arguing on a pasuk. If a witness does not give his testimony, he will bear his iniquity. And everyone agrees that the halacha follows Rabbanu arguing Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. Now again, I'll say, now the Rabbanon hold that halacha l'maisa, witnesses have to go ahead and see the same event together. Remember again, that's Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha they were talking about before. Everyone agrees that the halacha follows Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, right? The Gemara says, "V'hacha ba'akushe hagada l're'iyah kamifligis." What's the machlokes over here? Do we compare the actual experiencing of the event with the giving over of the testimony? Mar savar makshinan hagada l're'iyah, or mar savar lo makshinan. One opinion says we compare the giving over of testimony to the actual seeing of the event, and just like you have to see the event together, so too testimony has to be conveyed together. And the other opinion says, no, we do not compare the witnessing of the event to the actual giving over of the testimony. Okay, Rabbi Shimon al Yakum, have mishtaqid Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, lemismechei. So we'll say another story. Rabbi Shimon al Yakum was supposed to say, so I just want to point out, so we are left here, and this is really fascinating, we're left here with our three-way machlokes, right? How does testimony work? Tanakama, witnesses have to see the event together and certainly testify about it together. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, they don't have to see it together, but they have to testify together. And Rabbi Nassan, they don't have to see it together, and they don't even have to testify together. Three-way machlokes, and interesting enough, what we see is, what's at the root of the machlokes? Either svara, logic, or ultimately interpretation of a pasuk. All right, we'll say, you know what? We tried. We gave it a good. We're fine. We are right on target. Right on target. We're going to finish the Parak Emeres Hashem before Shabbos, and there's some way. I'll say some good. We'll be fine. Shkach, we'll stop over here for today. Shkach, everyone. Maybe I'll record some of this and catch us up a little bit. We'll see. All right, Shkach, everyone. All right, everyone. Zoom. Have a great day. Yeah, interrupting. It's your makom. It's good.